Welcome to the Soberish Uprising. My name is Holly Crevo, a former heavy drinker who started a Soberish Uprising of her own almost 2 years ago, and everything in her life changed. On the Soberish Uprising, we tell stories of finding freedom from alcohol on our own terms. We dismantle the beliefs we have about alcohol and blaze our own path to freedom. On today's episode, it's a little different in that I am going to share a little bit of what I've been doing on Instagram. I have been doing the A to Z of being soberish because there's so much about this topic, right? So I'm going to share here what I've been sharing on Instagram. Instagram, I am at Soberish Uprising. So check that out as well for some great content. But for me, I just want to share my A to E of being soberish because, as I said, there's so many different facets of what a soberish journey looks like. And if you're new to this podcast, for me, soberish looks like not partaking in drinks 99% of the time. And even on that 1% that I do, it is usually one drink. There's not even really the effects of feeling drunk, but really it's about choosing me over booze. I have been on the soberish journey almost 2 years. And as I said, everything has changed. So let's get into the A to E of being soberish. So, A is for anxiety. I am a huge lover of words. I love to read. I love to talk. I love to write. So we're going to define these as we go through them, right? To really get clear on what they mean. So anxiety, we all know what anxiety can feel like, but the definition is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent or unknown event. If you had asked me when I was consistently drinking if I was an anxious person, I would have probably said no. I worried, I had a little anxiety, but I didn't consider myself like an anxious person. But it was so interesting because when I look back, I was 100% anxious. And how it manifested for me was feelings of frustration, annoyance, impatience, just like a simmer of edginess. And I had just assumed that was part of my personality. Maybe a defect of some part, right? I was just a high strung in like person, right? And yes, I am. I have a tendency to go that way, but booze was adding to that so much. And here's the thing, I had been drinking consistently since I was 21, 20, 19 years old, right? It wasn't, blackout drunk, but it was like there weren't many weeks where I didn't have at least a couple glasses of wine or a cocktail. So I had been living with it for so long. And here's what's sneaky about anxiety, right? Is that, or booze and anxiety, booze can stay in our system in some form for up to like 72 hours. So we drink on a Monday because we've had a bad day, right? And that anxiousness starts to come because booze does make us anxious. And then the next day we don't have a drink, right? But that anxiety is still there. So we say, oh, it's not the booze that causes the anxiety, it's everything else. And yes, there are other things. So that's why it can be real sneaky to like separate those. And of course, when your anxiety comes up, you're typically not eating as well as you should be, not taking care of your body, maybe not doing the right things for your body. So it just snowballed, right? And so for me, that anxiety was so big because again, when it went away, I was like, oh, maybe I'm not as high strung as I thought I was. Maybe I was just living with this simmer of like anxiety that I had literally thought was just part of who I was. And that doesn't mean that I still don't get anxious every once in a while, or that doesn't mean that I don't get impatient or frustrated or edgy. That stuff still comes up. But now I'm really able to identify, okay, like what is that exactly? Right. Instead of just assuming it was a way of life. So A is for anxiety, B is for boring. The definition of boring is not interesting or tedious. I hear so many people, and there's a conception that like sober people are boring. And I probably had a little bit of that, right? Like I was afraid that my life would just be doled out, right? All the things, I just couldn't do all the things that I wanted to do because I couldn't drink. And that's how close together they were. It's pretty crazy, right? I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to go to happy hour or go to a girls' night out or go on holidays or go on vacation or do all these things because I'm not drinking. Because for me, those were so tied together. It was hard to separate. And so what I think is so fascinating about this is that It was never excuse me, it was never about the booze. Yeah. Yes, looking back, I think sometimes it can add to it, but it was really about the fellowship and the experience, and I'm able to do every single thing I did when I was drinking, except just not drink at the rate I was, right? So there's a perception that it's boring, that you're not gonna be able to do anything. I had a guest on, um, that she's amazing. She was at a, she talked about not being able to go to Italy. In her mind, she just couldn't go to Italy and have booze when she became sober. And then all of a sudden she's like, "No, I do. I get to do everything. I just don't drink." Right? And that's what it was for me. I do every single thing I did before. I just don't drink. Sometimes I don't enjoy them as much as when I was drinking. Going to a happy hour and for 2 or 3 hours and people just getting really drunk isn't fun. So I don't do those. But it didn't take away. And in fact, those events that I used to have drinks, they're just so much better now. I'm more present. I can enjoy them. I can do things after where typically I would drink too much and I couldn't. And what was boring, goodness, excuse me, was like not doing the things I wanted to do because I drank too much. What's boring is falling into what society tells us that we have to do XYZ. Like that is boring. And so that's something that did hold me back, right? Will these activities be dull and boring? And I'm here to tell you whatever you were doing sober, or excuse me, drunk, you can do sober, and it's going to be so much better. C is for confidence. The definition of confidence is a feeling or belief that one can rely on someone or something. It's a firm trust. The definition of confidence, still gives me a lump in my throat. A firm trust, a belief you can rely on someone. When I was heavy drinking, which is not probably as much as you think it is, 8 drinks a week, which is very, very easy to do. When I was heavy drinking, I couldn't rely on myself. I couldn't rely on myself. I didn't have a firm trust in my abilities because it's hard to have confidence with yourself when you keep on quitting. When you keep on quitting on yourself, right? It's hard to build confidence when you make promises and you just break them because of booze, right? That wears down on you. And I've always said, nothing feels as good as keeping a promise to yourself. I don't even care what the promise is, right? It could be a big promise, it could be a little promise, nothing feels that good. And it's hard to build that confidence when you keep on breaking that promise. Because for years, I just knew I needed to do something different. And I'm like, nah, but maybe not now. Maybe not now. Right. And it makes total sense. Changing my relationship with booze could have the potential to totally wreck my life. So it makes sense I put it off, but it did not. But we talk about confidence. I was really surprised how much when my anxiety was going down, my confidence was going up. So it just met in the middle, right? And skyrocketed. And, one, I was honoring that commitment and that felt really good. But then also I was waking up refreshed, more creative, more clear, more able to handle the things that happened, right? I wasn't muddled and tired and I didn't spend that night beating myself up. I was able to say, yeah, this problem came down and it's a big problem, but I'm able to deal with it, right? I'm able to keep a promise to myself. I'm able to show up and I'm able to do all these things that are important to me because I have built a trust in myself. And that's a big one because nobody knows the promises we break to ourselves. Nobody knows when we have that feeling I need to do something different. I don't want to do this. This isn't who I want to be. And we just deny it. And you can't have a confident life when you keep on betraying yourself. What does confidence look like? Confidence looks like starting this podcast. Confidence looks like working on a program to start sober launches. Confidence looks like having difficult conversations. Confidence looks like trying new things. Confidence looks like going to the gym and trying a new class and staying at the door, not wanting to go in because I'm really scared, but knowing it's going to pay off for me. It can look so many different ways. But I've never had as much confidence as I did when I eliminated booze. It took so much off my plate and I was able to really focus on how I wanted to show up. So C is for confidence. D is for delay. Delay, a period of time when something is late or postponed. I have been known to be a procrastinator. I still kind of do that. My mom will tell you stories of when I was little and I'd be I'm sure I'm not the only one, the day before, it was the Friday and I was like, hey, I have a big bug project due Monday. And I'm sure she was just eye rolling. I like to procrastinate, like to keep things keep people on their toes. But back to delays. It's easy to delay something that we know is good for us, but is also going to be really hard. If I had $1 for every time I said some version of I'm gonna quit drinking for a little bit, or I'm not gonna drink till Friday, or I'm only gonna have 2 drinks a week, and delay putting that off because, oh, a happy hour popped up, or I had a bad day, or it was a great weather, or it was a Tuesday or a holiday or a wedding, all the bullshit excuses I gave myself to delay what I knew I needed to do, right? You know, good news is like good news, bad news. There's never going to be an easy time to change your relationship with alcohol. There's always going to be a reason to delay, always. But the good news is you can start at any moment, right? Like there's always going to be a good reason to start too, because you just know, like delaying what you know you need to do goes back to that confidence, right? And it just like, excuse me, shuts yourself down. And know that there's no judgment in this. It may be something that you've been wanting to do for a long, long time, and you're finally like, I need to do it. Don't beat yourself up for the hundreds of times that you said you were going to. It may have looked like an overnight success, or I just flipped a button and decided not to drink. This was years in the making, years of delays, years of excuses. And I believed our excuses because we can believe our excuses very, very easily. And especially it can be scary, right? We're changing our relationship with alcohol. It can change our relationships. We have to deal with stuff maybe that we haven't been dealing with. We have to find new ways to spend our time. But again, there's never going to be a good time, and it's always a good time to change a relationship with alcohol. And again, those delays, you can find them. I could find them today on reasons to change, but make the choice to start. And lastly, in today's A to Z's, is E is for ego. So the definition of ego is an individual sense of self or perception of their identity. So often we think that, an ego is a terrible thing. And a healthy ego is the best thing you can do. It's confidence, it's a knowing, it's a belief. In themselves, just an ego is not good or bad. It's really your perception of yourself. And when I made that decision September 13th that I was not going to be this person anymore, my ego was threatened because my ego for 20 years had identified with being a drinker, had made plans based on drinking. And now I was telling myself that like, no, that's wrong and that's not good for you. And you've been like harming yourself in some way for the past X years. Like that did not feel good. Right. And it was like that inner ego conflict. Like my ego is like, it's totally fine. You can keep on drinking. What's the big deal? But my knowing, my intuition, my inner spirit is like, no, we can't. Like, this isn't working. Right. My ego is like, oh, but you don't drink as much as everybody else. You're totally fine. Like people who have a drinking problem don't start businesses and move overseas and buy houses and all this stuff. But my knowing's like, yeah, they do. They do it all the time. Right. So the ego can come into play and it's totally normal, right? So maybe you're in this space and you're feeling like a little bit of conflict, right? It's that inner conflict. But like, is it the ego that wants to be right, that needs to be important? Or is it that knowing inside that needs to be different, right? Because for me, I had to say, yes, ego, I get it. But like, this is also who we can be, right? We don't have to be this person. Because Holly sober and Holly drunk are two different people. And now my ego is somebody who doesn't identify as a drinker. Do I have drinks once a month, once every 45 days, whatever that looks like? Absolutely. But it is no longer a part of my ego, but it was for a long time. So just be really noticeable of that. So again, those are my A to Z's of being soberish with A to E. And as I leave you today, I just want to share, one or two things that were so supportive for me during this. And it is one, look at this all as data, right? I love to track my emotions, to track my thoughts, look at my drinks, like look at it as data with no judgment, no needing to be right. Just look at it as data if you were like hovering above yourself, right? And like, look at that anxiety, right? Oh, I am anxious. What was I drinking? Oh, that's interesting. I had 2 glasses of wine and I didn't sleep good. I woke up feeling super anxious. Okay, cool. In an event, you're like, this would be that you're drinking. Like, could I do this event without alcohol and still have a great time? Probably, right? Confidence. Where are you lacking confidence? What pieces of your life are you missing that in? What would it look like to Keep the promise to yourself. What do you have to do? Again, nothing feels as good as keeping a promise to yourself. I don't care if it's just to get up and walk half a mile. It feels so good and it builds your confidence and builds and builds and builds. Those delays. Why am I delaying this? That's interesting. I've XYZ over the last month, I've had 4 occasions I wanted to quit drinking. What was my excuse? Oh, that's interesting. That's all we're doing here. Then E, your ego. Check in on that. Is this my ego? Is this wanting me to be right? Wanting me to be liked? Wanting me to be this person that I'm not? Or is this my like intuition and knowing? Saying like this, we can do better. Wait, this can't be it. So again, it's just same with curiosity. And then 2, this is a word we use a lot. It was the name of my first podcast, grace, right? Show yourself grace. Again, 20 years of drinking before I finally turned that around, probably 5 years of like, this shouldn't be this way. It's okay. It's going to take some starts. It's going to take some stops. It's going to take some playing around, like, but you're doing the work. You're capturing the data. You're making changes. You're seeing what works, what doesn't. So remember to show yourself grace. Thank you for tuning in to my A to Z of being soberish. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, be sure to follow me over on Instagram at Soberish Uprising. And also, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel, to leave a review so that we can get this message out to more people. We all deserve to lead a soberish life, one of freedom, one of clarity, one of confidence. So I appreciate your support in getting this message out. Thank you and have a great day.